All right, well, you get to see the backside of my head.
All right, man, here we go. What's up, man? Welcome,
brother?
everyone. This is the Do No Evil, Speak No Evil show, where I interview awesome individuals that are making a positive local impact. I'm your host, Blair Neher, a.k.a. the Chief Primate. My guest today is Brian Muka, a.k.a. the Fierce Sherpa. We'll get into this a bunch more, but Brian helps people repurpose their fear into something useful. Brian's a Navy veteran, former bomb technician, and platoon commander. So, Brian, thank you for your service, first of all, and thank you for coming on the show.
Appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. It's something I love talking about, and it's just it's such a prevalent and relevant topic. You know, the thing about fear is it operates in the subconscious, and so it's so good to talk about it because left unchecked, fear operates in the subconscious, steals our decisions, really takes a lot away from us, and it really requires us to become its master.
Nice. So I got to give a big shout out to our host today, who again has let us use their facility for the show, Optima Med. Optima Med is a higher education consulting firm based here in Richmond, Virginia. Optima Med provides college admissions and financial aid coaching to students, with the end game being attendance at the best fit college at an affordable price, leading to the right career. So again, thanks Tom Leahy and Optima Med.
It's neat how Tom does that too, because it isn't about just getting into college. It's actually finding the career that you want and then working backwards the best road to get there.
Yeah, and one of the things is, you know, he steers people away from saying, this is my dream job or the dream I want. The job you dream of may not be a well-paying job. So he helps fit your skills in jobs that actually pay.
It may not exist yet either. That's the crazy thing about your dream job, especially how fast technology moves today.
So this is just my second show, and I know you have some podcasting experience. So again, I'll have to lean on you if I wade into the deep end too much.
We're in trouble.
All right, man, let's get into it.
Yeah, man.
So I've heard the 2-minute version of your story several times now, but I know there's a lot more to it. So please tell us your story, your passion, and how Fierce Sherpa was born out of it.
Well, yeah, so I'll cut right to the chase, right? So Fierce Sherpa was born from my biggest failure. We'll go full circle back to that idea. But when I was at Drexel University, I thought I wanted to be a submarine nuke power officer, and then I spent 5 days underwater in one. It's like living in a clock. I was quickly cured of that. It's bizarre to be without sunlight under the ocean for days at a time. Very disorienting. Like I said, quickly cured.
Nice.
A couple years went by. I really got after it in terms of I was on the cycling team in college. I would do triathlons for fun. And it wasn't uncommon to do a 50-mile bike ride and not think twice about it. So we had this gentleman, Sean Simmons. He came to University of Pennsylvania, Navy ROTC. He went to Buds, and he became then an Army Special Forces guy after resigning his commission. He's now a doctor in the Navy again, so we celebrated him becoming a lieutenant twice.
Nice. Very
interesting story, but he believed in my EOD pursuit when I didn't. He started this. EOD stands for Explosive Ordnance Disposal. It's the bomb technicians of the Navy. If you've ever seen the Hurt Locker, it's like that, but way cooler because it's Navy and a lot more shooting, moving, communicating, a lot more mobility. And we'll get to this a little later, the important role that the EOD tech plays, specifically the Navy EOD tech, the role that they play on the battlefield and how they're a force multiplier. So we started this morning twice a week. We do this morning EOD style PT, which means he would just beat the crap out of us, and I loved it. I love suffering with these people. A lot of my best friends, that turned into driving down to Atlantic City in the middle of winter, doing surf torture, and we found a lot of joy in the cold and suffering together.
I can't even imagine.
So our group did a lot of special things in the military, SEALs and other things. A couple of us became EOD techs. And I did a 2-week summer training. That's a long story. Through the synchronicities and serendipities, I get to spend some time with EOD Group 2. I spent 2 weeks with those guys. Jumped out of airplanes, got to shoot guns. We blew up flare pods from F-14 Tomcats. I was hooked. I came home and I lit every candle in church and begged God, Lord, please help me be selected. And I was. It was incredible. One of 17 throughout the country from Navy ROTC. There was a group from the Naval Academy And we were the first year group that didn't have to do the ship tour. So after my commissioning, went to dive school in the winter. It gets cold in Florida, I learned. There was ice on the deck of some of the ships we dove off of or dove from. And then the journey began. That was 8 weeks, 40 days worth of just proving your worth. They couldn't stop lunch, right? So we'd be up on the grinder at 5:45 in the morning and just get beaten until lunchtime some days. And we knew that we were going somewhere special, right? So that was 8 weeks over Christmas and New Year's. And then we started a year-long course at the EOD school. That's in Eglin Air Force Base. It's the hardest school, I think, in the military because it's not only is it physical, but it's also very cerebrally challenging. Learning to play chess with bomb builders. Both conventional munitions. We've talked a little bit about improvised explosive devices, the weapon of choice for insurgents today. And it was incredible. Very high pressure. I learned a lot about worry. I failed my first division. Got to get that out of the way. Worry is not a performance-enhancing supplement. And I wanted it so badly that the more I fretted about it, the worse I performed. And so I failed my first ordnance identification test. So I had 5 weeks to think about that in the dive locker. And if I failed the test again, my EOD career was over. So I ended up finishing up school, no problem. I was stationed in Virginia Beach, Mobile Unit 12. I'm a plank owner. Plank owner is kind of a cool term. When they would construct new ships, each member of the crew was entitled to a portion of that boat. And so we were the first crew of Mobile Unit 12. We were out at this lovely trailer, and that's how it all began.
Nice.
And so I'll work this back into how Fear Sherpa was created. So we were the first year group. So it means we didn't go to a ship to get officer training, and they didn't really know what to do with us yet. For a lot of reasons, partly my fault. I made a lot of mistakes as a junior officer. I had a boss who didn't believe that I belonged as part of the community, and something that God was teaching me, or the universe, depending on your beliefs. For me, it's God. I had to learn how to deal with long-term fears, because in the moment, I've learned from my time on stage and presenting and singing and acting and all that stuff, I know how to turn nervous into excitement, like with a smile. It changes a lot of things. And this question, could this be the feeling I get before I do something awesome? And I learned later that gratitude, hey, I thank you for this opportunity to do X, Y, and Z, changes the entire game. You can't feel gratitude and fear at the same time. I choose gratitude. Makes it workable, right? So, long story short, did my first combat deployment. 5 weeks into that, I was removed from command back to the flagpole, the headquarters, for loss of confidence in my leadership. I was set up to fail. My chief, his dad was dying of cancer. I sent him home, and I failed. I was left to fail. And it was one of those things that took me a long time to really realize how angry I was about that. Because thankfully no one died. No one got hurt. It was without consequence except, my questions as a leader, started. And then started a very dark 4.5 months of being the night watch captain. And I don't know if I did this or this was done to me, but it was as if I had leprosy. And I felt or perceived, I'm not sure which. I'm sure there's some self-selection in there.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a little both.
Not part of the winner circle. And so thank God for CrossFit, thank God for my guitar, thank God for Skype. And I, believe it or not, I actually found escape in running. I started training for a marathon. I read the book Born to Run. And running became my escape from that terribly dark place. I was given another chance. I took another team. We're getting ready to go to Afghanistan to support the Rangers. And a couple weeks before we were supposed to leave, I was called in my skipper's office. A guy that I would follow anywhere. Brian, I've lost a lot of sleep over this, but you're not the man to take your team to Afghanistan. I didn't hear that. What I heard was, you're not good enough. And that was the start of my avalanche. Buried alive, dark, not knowing which way was up, without my North Star. My North Star was to be, how can I be a better special operations officer? The reason I got out of bed in the morning, we got to do some really, really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Monday could be, hey, we're learning new entry techniques on vehicles with robots. Tuesday could be, hey, we're at the shooting range, learning, close quarters combat stuff or long range sniper stuff. That's also a mitigation technique. Wednesday could be jumping out of airplanes or helicopters. Thursday could be diving operations. And Friday we would get issued our Secret Service credentials and literally be anywhere in the world protecting the president, vice president, and other dignitaries. That was my life, man.
That sounds intense.
Every time I go through a metal detector, I'm like, man, I remember when I used to just be able to walk around those, right? And yeah, it was the James Bond lifestyle that I craved. And then halfway through it, this thought virus. What if I took somebody's spot? What if they're right and I don't belong here? Which is crazy. That's a 5-minute fear now. I let that grow for 18 months. I made a mountain range out of it. And guess what? I manifested it. I manifested that fear. And after that, I started working with this very talented therapist. She was the Group 2 mental health professional. She would become my life coach. Her self-proclaimed title is my adopted Jewish auntie, Talia Gershon. She believed in me when I didn't. I'll never forget, she asked me a question, do you believe God loves you unconditionally? I said, yes. Do you love you unconditionally? No. I didn't. I was so ashamed. And I had a lot to learn. And so I started writing. I have these red moleskin journals that I documented my path from being buried alive to back to the land of the living, where I'm happily now. And what I learned was you can't self-rescue from an avalanche. It took a whole team. My wife, my family, my coach, believing in me when I didn't. And it's true in a real avalanche, and it's true with these amazing setbacks. We don't self-rescue. And so Fear Sherpa was born. I read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. Suffering is never in vain if we can find meaning. And so I became an observer of this whole process. I was writing this to help people that would come after me because I had such an amazing rescue team. I wanted to do that for others.
For others.
Yeah.
And so you've created a whole business and life out of this.
I have.
It's amazing.
It makes my heart sing, man. And 2 years ago, we went to Costa Rica, and I was watching the movie Concussion with Will Smith. Do you see that movie?
I have not.
It's an incredible film. And during this trip, as we were watching this movie, there's a scene in there where at the hands of the NFL, Dr. I forget his name. Man, sorry. Dr. Bennett Amalu. He finds this Pittsburgh Steeler who has this terrible, his brain has been basically decomposed by all of the concussions that he's seen.
Oh, man.
So at the hands of the NFL, they do some really terrible things to his wife and his unborn child. And he looks at his wife on empty, right? Completely on zero. I wish I never met that Pittsburgh Steeler. And his wife asks him, Bennett, what are the chances that someone who doesn't know anything about the NFL, who is a neurosurgeon and pathologist, would come across this? And the chances are zero. And I started weeping during that, and I got it. I understood, hey, I need you to go do this thing. So what are the chances somebody's strong enough to make it through dive school, smart enough to make it through EOD school, with the compassion, wherewithal to create something for other people? And I mean, the chances were zero. And I found a lot of comfort in that. And ever since that realization, it's amazing how these things just are aligning, and it's all unfolding the way that it's supposed to.
Yeah. And that's why I had to have you on. I talked to you about this concept a while ago. I just know you make a huge positive impact in people's lives. So
Thank you, sir.
I knew you had to be one of my first guests, or as soon as I could get you on. And I kind of captured you on Friday and held you to it. It was like Thursday, right?
You can do this, right? Yeah, man, I love to.
I appreciate
glad to be here.
I appreciate you jumping in on short notice.
Sure.
So for everyone out there that might not know, what is a Sherpa and where does that term originate?
Of course. So in the climbing community hates that I'm using this term, right? But I couldn't find another word that really sums up what this mission and movement is other than Sherpa. So it's with great honor and homage to this tribe of people who thrive on the top of the world. The term porter and Sherpa in common speak are used sort of interchangeably. They are not the same. So porters carry stuff. Sherpas are the tacticians that help climbers get to the top of Mount Everest, K2, but they're also a tribe. So not only are they specially adapted for areas that have 2/3 less oxygen than we're currently breathing, but they also thrive on the top of the world. And so the other part of this is just as if you would use the word Blackfoot tribe or Apache tribe, you could use Sherpa tribe. So a big part of this, and this is important, my friend Papa Sunshine asked me this, are you the Fear Sherpa? And I said, no, I am a fear Sherpa, making other Sherpas, right? Creating this tribe of people growing and expanding and being uncomfortable together. And we're all growing and improving upon this whole concept, as a tribe.
And that tribe, they are literally physically different than other people in the world, and they are the best equipped physically and mentally to do the job. And I see a lot of parallels. I think it's a great term because somebody that doesn't have your story and experience isn't the same preparedness to help other people in this scenario. So Brian, explain what an IED is and all the forms that they can take.
So that's an interesting question. So IED, the acronym, the TLA, 3-letter abbreviation. There's a ton of those in the military. Improvised explosive device. So they're classified based on delivery method and trigger method. So basically, as creative as you can be, it's a type of IED. So cell phone, RC, radio controlled improvised explosive device. You have mechanically operated pressure plates, spoons from grenades, those physically activated RC IEDs. It's really limitless.
And then the type of actual explosive that they're attached to is also, as unique as can be. I mean, it's from old Russian bombs from the Afghanistan-Russia war,
yes,
to modern C4 stuff like that. But it isn't usually something pretty rigged.
It's genius. I mean, they have our enemies, the insurgents that we fight. They have these incredible TTPs, tactical procedures. I forget what the other T stands for. I'm gonna brush up on my TLAs. But they have manuals and training these people how to do these things, and it's incredible how rudimentary they are, how cheap they are to make compared to how expensive it is to counter them. Yeah.
And it's something that.
But it's everything from ANFO, ammonium nitrate fuel oil. That's what the Unabomber used.
Yep.
The truck bombs, all the way up to, like you said, Russian munitions and beyond. It just depends on what's available.
And it's something the military hasn't had to face until the Iraq and Afghanistan engagements.
Our military hasn't, but like in Ireland, like the IRA. Britain wrote the manual for a lot of this.
Really?
That's sort of where it started, as far as we're concerned. We learned a lot from those guys.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Iraq, Afghanistan. We got to spend some time at the crime lab. I used to teach a course for Army captains and lieutenants, and we got to spend some time at the crime lab at the FBI in Quantico. So I got to see the first 2 IEDs from Iraq and Afghanistan. The thing I remember about the one of them, the first one in Iraq was a Casio watch rigged up when the alarm chime, that would activate the circuit to detonate, right? So that was a timer. And then the next one was a Nokia cell phone, similar method in terms of the chipset. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
But my dad, it was the Casio watch the same model that my dad wears was the same on the first ID.
The first ID.
Yeah, he loves his little Casio watch.
So the thought of or idea of even being near an IED or a bomb is just simply terrifying. I mean, these are devices that rip military vehicles in half, as well as the men and women inside of those vehicles, and do just unbelievable damage. So my first instinct, as well as the average Joe, would be just to run the other way. So how do you even begin to get in the mindset and the journey to be the guy that is going towards that? And number 2 is disarming that device. It's just, I can't really wrap my brain around that.
There's a lot of training that goes into it, right? So, so you hear bomb. There's a lot of different ways that can be actuated in those things. And so I can't really get into the tactics of that, certainly.
Right.
But the mindset is we do a lot in training. And so I can tell you every time I was blown up in training, those are the things I carry with me to this day.
So like a simulation, you went the wrong way and you were blown up.
I'll tell you one of them. So we were at in Redstone, in Huntsville, Alabama, and we're doing this tunnel problem. There's a whole bunch of storage boxes, and we were clearing booby traps through here. So, using red light discipline. And I remember coming up this ladder well, and I go to open the lid. There's a hand grenade in there. Using the spoon, so if that would open all the way, the spoon would go in, and that would be a detonation. I saw that, grabbed it. First day with a new knife, actually. It's Emerson Commander. And so as you push it in your pocket, it flips the blade out. I wrapped it with tape, and I was able to set that off the side. I'm like, man, I feel like the man, right? How cool. I felt, so, really, really tactical, as I would say, right? And so I'm searching the rest of the room for other booby traps. And I shine my red light in front of this cordless phone. There was a light sensor in the phone. So as soon as I did that, and the red powder everywhere, I just got killed. So every time I look at a cordless phone, I think about, wow, I wonder if there's a light sensor in there. So you start to learn these things, right? And you spend time with it. You understand how the munitions work and those things. And so the EOD operator is a special place in the battle. It's a force multiplier, right? For strategy, also for clearing impediments to convoys and everything else, right? And so usually you get the call about that. So hey, they've cordoned off the area. It's over there, and so there's ways of working from the outside in, least risky, most time consuming, to highest risk, least time consuming. Mm-hmm. So everything is all about risk mitigation. How can I test this theory to make sure that this doesn't go off? Or maybe we want it to go off. Getting control. So, blowing stuff up in place is a tactic. Having it function as designed is a tactic with everybody pulled back. And then everything from that to hands-on cutting wires.
Wow.
And sometimes not even by hand, sometimes with tools and those things.
Awesome.
Remote is the answer to the question. So the more stuff you can do remote, the better.
And put less people at risk.
Yes.
All right. So here's some hard, ugly numbers that I looked up earlier. In 2009, there were a record 7,228 IED attacks in the Afghanistan war, killing 280 soldiers. Mm-hmm. In 2010, insurgents planted 14,661 IEDs, killing 368 soldiers. The question kind of answers itself, but I want to get your take. How important is the role of the bomb tech in today's military and on the battlefield?
It's huge. It's the weapon of choice. It's conventional munitions being repurposed as IEDs. We're so far away from symmetric warfare. It's all asymmetric insurgent stuff. And so if that's the weapon of choice, you don't even need to be present for that to function as designed. Yeah. They're very smart. They watch us. They have cell phone technology where they can move very quickly. And so they learn our patterns. They place booby traps, as it were, right, in terms of IEDs. To deny access to certain things, and really, it's a long game, right? If you go toe-to-toe with the United States, military to military, you will lose.
Right, so that's a conventional war that they will not fight.
They won't. Why would they do that? It doesn't make any sense. So Bin Laden's plan, from way back when, was to bleed us economically. It's a long game. Eventually, we'll get out of their backyard, maybe, hopefully, someday soon. Only that opinion. I don't know why we're still over there.
And that's a whole nother
conversation I don't really want to have. But it's not just countering the IED, right? So you're working with men and women who are very, very talented. If this was the time of the space program, our EOD techs would be on the moon. I really feel that. And so it's not just the hand entry. It's not just the tactical skills. It's the ability to think like the enemy. You got to think like the bomb builder to be able to defeat the bomb builder. And so that's why the SEALs, that's why other assets use Navy EOD techs, because they can keep up, they can shoot, move, and communicate the way that they can, and also they've got the strategy in it. So, force multiplier is the term used. So whatever's happening, EOD techs can clip in and enhance whatever the operation is. Just for the way that the brain works. Having learned problem solving, how to get around things with the tools that you have.
So get in a little bit what you hinted on before of Navy versus other branches of military, the specialization that the Navy bomb techs or these guys have.
Yeah, so in the 80s, the leadership in the Navy and the EOD community was brilliant. They knew that we were going forward in this shoot, move, communicate, clipping in with special forces and special warfare, right? What do we need to equip our guys with to be able to do that? Well, they need to be able to jump out of airplanes. They need to be able to shoot. They need to be able to do close quarters communication, combat, and so they saw that before any other service did. And so that was written into, the mission profiles that EOD teams would be able to do this in the Navy. The Army was the slowest to adopt that. Air Force is actually the second fastest adopting, and the Marine Corps is in there somewhere too. Usually their struggle is not enough dollars for equipment. But yeah, for a very long time, Navy has been the premier, able to integrate anywhere type force.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Navy has the covering the oceans, stigma, but
that was a joke while we were in Iraq. The Army guys just pee on the ordnance, so the Navy guys got to take care of that.
the EOD and as well as the SEALs. I mean, that's so far different than the standard Navy of old.
It's true. The joke was we were the sand sailors. And you were a diver. What boats were you on? I don't know. I spent a lot more time under boats than I did on them. Thank God. My dad was like, "Hey, how come you don't want to be a ship driver?" I'm like, "No, Dad." Yeah, he's a bit wiser than I am, maybe. Yeah.
Cool. So let's get into what you do now and what Fear Sherpa does for those who are affected by their fears. So at a high level, what is your end game state or goal for your clients?
Yes. I want people to change their relationship to fear. I just get really annoyed when I listen to Gary Vaynerchuk. Sorry, Gary, I don't mean to just call you out, but just overcome your fear. Oh yeah?
Just do it.
Just really. And for a long time, man, I would get annoyed by that, and I didn't really understand why. And the first thought was, man, that would be great if I could just overcome fear.
Press the button.
And then I realized that, none of us were able to do that. So the people that really knew fear, that's not how fear works, right? And then it was like, well, what a waste. Why would you want to overcome fear? Fear is the reason why I go to check my parachute 3 times. Make sure I have the equipment with batteries that are charged before we leave, right? To make sure every area that Murphy could screw us over has been addressed to the best of our knowledge, right? And so it's fear that shows us okay, I need to rehearse this another. I'm not really ready, right? And also shows you the changing conditions. It's extremely valuable. So the end state of this is to take people who have an untrained fear response and to give them a trained fear response. It's similar to special forces, special warfare, some military, professional fighters have a trained fear response. And so anybody can learn this. And the whole idea, I tried to sum this up into a Twitter-sized bite. There's a book called Talk Like TED. And TED Talks are incredible for distilling down people's lives' work, right? Very quickly, in 18 minutes or less. And the Twitter bite was, fear in the hands of a master becomes a superpower, but fear in the hands of the untrained can be deadly. And I don't mean deadly like a euphemism. I mean literally could kill you in the moment or even long-term stuff. So if you're always afraid, your health will be affected. Because if your body, your amygdala, the whole brain group, to use a military term, thinks you're constantly running from a saber-toothed tiger, the body automatically will prioritize certain systems in the body. It shuts off the digestion and it turns off the immune system. You can't actually recover. You can't actually heal from injuries and illness if you're constantly afraid. And then what we're doing now with Dr. David Berv and I, he is a chiropractor. He's a healer from the future, actually, I believe. He's a huge advocate of float tanks, deprivation tanks, floating in Epsom salts. And we've been doing work lately. He does a lot with the passive therapy. So massage, floating, chiropractic, acupuncture, stuff done to you, passive therapy. I do a lot with breath and mindset change and asking better questions and those things. So combining those two things together, passive and active therapy together, right? And what we've learned is that the pain gate and the fear gate are very, very similar. So if you're experiencing a lot of fear, you're going to experience a lot more pain, and vice versa. And it takes these massive things like ice baths, being in a safe environment with a tribe, When we're synced up with other people, we forget to suffer because now we're part of a group, and we forget about our individual interests. So
I can totally see that.
Ways of stripping back, our neocortex, our new brain, our human brain, is very beneficial in terms of when it's calm. I've created a new term I'll share in a second. When it's calm, it's very good at figuring things out. But you add a little bit of adrenaline, a little bit of cortisol, you start to become more and more reptilian. So the more stress and fear you add, the term that I've coined, I hope you guys like this, reptile dysfunction.
I get it.
And so, in movies when you see guys slap the side of their rifles with the palm, yeah, it looks pretty sexy. But the other way to do it is with your thumb. And when we call it the caustic cocktail. When the adrenaline shot would hit, there's just so much adrenaline you could miss the slide release. So your weapon's not useful. And so by making the micro skill a macro skill, it accounted for the reptilian effect of that. So the whole end state of all this is, remember, take a breath, interrupt that fear loop, which is also very similar in the gatekeeper to shame, guilt, and addiction. If we can interrupt that and become a little bit calmer, the calmer we become, the more options we can see. I train my folks to be the calmest person in the room. What a gift if in an emergency situation you can take a breath, come off the line a little bit like, oh, we just need to do this. And that calmness is infectious, just as panic is.
Right.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Making fear small and usable. Customato, Mike Tyson's trainer, he said, fear is useful. And it's the friend of the extraordinary. It can cook your food, it can warm you, but it also can burn your house down. Fear needs a master. I teach people to be that master.
Very cool. Very cool. So it all seems to start with being able to identify and understand our fears. How do you help somebody identify something that terrifies them well enough to be able to address it? I mean, if it's this thing that just scares the crap out of them, they don't even want to think about it.
Of course.
They want to avoid it. So how do you get...
We don't start there.
Ah.
So in studying chess, you don't start with the whole game all at once, right? Maybe you start with opening moves. But certainly you want to work endgame before you really understand the middle of the chessboard, right? So we work with smaller, medium-sized fears, right? So, a big fear of mine was, the fear of who am I to lead this movement? I'm not cured of fear, right? I don't start there, right? You start with fear of public speaking. And so, learning the habits to make that smaller, useful, and then as an energy source, we start there. So something that's not the biggest, baddest fear that someone has, I don't want to start there.
Right.
And actually, I want people in the first month that we work together, become an observer of your fear. I don't know if you've ever heard this expression, but we are not our thoughts. We are not our fears either. Just like clouds coming in. It's just input. It's just kind of like the worried mom, hey, did you think about this? Hey, did you think about this? That's very valuable. And at some point in all of our lives, Mom, I've got it. We're going to have an awesome snowboard trip. Yes, I have my emergency beacon. Yes, I have my warm clothes.
Got my helmet.
Yeah, we're ready to go. We're going to have a great time, but thank you, right? And so naming fear, becoming observer of it, gives you that perspective to then learn to be its master. My fear's name is Joe. So Joe shows up before shows like this, make sure I'm prepared before public speaking events, and even crucial conversations.
Joe was in my car earlier on the way here.
Yeah, good. Good. It's good to have some fear. It's good to have some nervous and repurposing what that feeling is, right? So this could be the feeling I get before we go and shoot an awesome podcast, right? And it's also sort of that waypoint, that little flag that says, I'm going to a part of the air of my life's map that I've never been to before. As far as I'm concerned, it's white space on an uncolored in map, right? And as we go into uncharted territory, if we're not nervous, if we're not a little scared, something's really wrong, right? You're either lying or you're a psychopath. Those are the options. And so it's interesting in the lying category, I'm not afraid of anything. I was talking to a Marine colonel. I'm not afraid of anything. How can you help me? I'm like, bro, I was bomb tech in the Navy. He's like, oh. I'm like, and you have fears too. And then he's like, yeah, I sure do. Right? And so as we're wasting energy pretending we don't have these fears, that's all wasted energy that if we could just say, yeah, I'm scared, and take a breath and say, hey, Blair, I'm scared about launching my online coaching business. Now it's not my shameful, dark secret. Now it's like, cool. It's probably really important, actually. And so by sharing with people that we trust, it loses its hold, right? Because fear operates in the subconscious, and if it's not given the attention that it needs, it festers and grows and steals decisions.
And I think it's, like you say, it's healthy because it shows that, number one, you're worried about doing awesome at something and it not sucking. And,
not sucking.
Yeah, and it's a term I seem to repeat a lot.
Being awesome.
That does not suck. But it shows that you care enough about it, or it's valuable enough to you to worry about it. But again, those are good drivers.
Sure. And as human beings, whether we're wired, we have to do things that's uncomfortable. We got to be cold. We got to be hot. We got to do exercise that's uncomfortable. We've got to do things that are uncomfortable. We need to grind against something. So when life is too easy, like this is the most abundant we've ever experienced life on this planet, right? It's the perfect temperature, like always, right? And when it's 60 degrees outside and people wearing a 600 fill goose down jacket because they're cold, like you can be 30 degrees outside. You can learn to warm yourself. Like your body needs that training stimulus, right? And so as we become more comfortable with being uncomfortable, which is why the ice, it's a very physical analogy for the uncomfortable things we can do emotionally, spiritually, relationship-wise, those things, professionally. We have to push against the uncomfortable, the nervous, the fear, the anxiety, all of those things, because as we do that, our life expands.
You don't grow if you don't do those things.
It's like, you want your beach muscles, you're gonna have to do some preacher curls, and it's gonna hurt a lot. And
you can't start in June.
No. That's such a great point, right? So however old we are, you're like, all right, I want to be cured of fear tomorrow. I can't help you with that. We can start to observe it, right? And so it's like a pendulum. So I'm 35. So if for 35 years I've not addressed something that's in my subconscious, it's a really powerful driver, right? Myelination, we form these pathways that short circuit things to make automatic reactions happen. And we reinforce that the more it happens, right? And so if I've myelinated a pathway for 35 years of my life, it's going to take, it may not take 35 years to unlearn that, but it's going to take some really concentrated effort to not only go back to center where I want to be, I've got to know that I've got to go all the way to the other side first. I've got to do all that work before I can come back to neutral. And so, a lot of this has to do with micro habits. Right now, what I'm working on, how am I ever going to get this done, right? That's a terrible question. What's one little thing I can do to make the situation better is a much easier question to answer. And so, even to the further side, the mind will return whatever question you ask it, right? Why do I always wait to the last possible second to do X, Y, and Z? Well, it's because you're a loser. It's because you always do this. Like,
you suck. You have no motivation.
Ask. You're not disciplined. Like, and generally, if you're saying I'm not disciplined, like, it isn't discipline that's the problem, right? It's creating a system where you can thrive. And so right now I'm working on the inner monologue questions to myself. What's one little thing I can do to improve the situation? How would someone who loves themselves solve this problem, right? And what do I need to know about this, right? So we're just so good at doing that to other people, but we don't do it for ourselves.
It's very true, and that you make me think of my own situation. My business is it's going nuts right now, and it's pretty intimidating, and I have to steer myself away from those thoughts of, holy cow, how am I going to ever get all of this done, and just start chunking away at it. And once I get started, I'm in.
You got to get started.
Yeah. And it usually just takes getting started with one little stupid thing, and then all of a sudden I'm, hours deep and I've gotten a ton done.
Sure.
But if I sit back and ponder, how am I going to get this done? It can be, paralyzing.
So we talked about this before. Worry is not a performance enhancing supplement. Only makes things worse. Can't make things better, right? Because we get more and more into the reptilian brain, the more pressure that we add.
Reptilian dysfunction.
Yeah, reptilian dysfunction. Reptile dysfunction.
You better trademark that.
And then, so we talked about my 18-month fear, right? And so, like, with your business, like career moves, divorce, like those things, it might be a 10-minute fear. right? So I have a technique called the fear flip. It's based on operational risk management. We take dangerous things and make them safe. And we take things that have a high likelihood of happening to make them a lot less likely, right? So that exercise looks a lot like start your timer for 7 minutes and don't go longer than 10. And listen to your friend Fear. Hey, Joe, what do I need to know about the situation? And brainstorm everything Joe's saying, right? And then the most critical part of this exercise is to stop at 10 minutes. Do not let it go to 18 months like I did. You'll get fired from your dream job, or what you thought was your dream job. Now you have a list of all the areas of concern. And what we're actually doing, so I don't have a good way to show this, but if you could imagine fear expanding to whatever size container you give it. Fear is a gas. It operates that way. Most people don't know how to use the imagination to work for them. Athletes know how to do that. Special forces guys know how to do that. They practice visualization the way they want the op or the competition to go, right? What most of us do is in our imagination, we allow the what if questions. Well, what if this happens? What if this happens, right? And that's just growing and growing, and it just keeps snowballing, and you're creating this avalanche. And so we have to be, very good curators of what's happening on the inner space, right? And so oftentimes that snowball looks like an 800-pound shadow of a tiger on the wall. And with this fear flip, this really looking at fear and harnessing it and using it, right? We're able to color in actually what we've perceived to be the biggest, baddest thing. We're actually finding the actual edge, where the actual edge of that fear is. And so as we continue to do this exercise for 10 minutes, we actually get to see the edges of the actual fear, not what we're perceiving to be the most dangerous and biggest, baddest things. And so when you really look at that 800-pound shadow, when you really do the exercise and you really kind of lean into fear, usually it's about a 10-pound kitty cat. Oh, was this the thing I was so afraid of? Now I can work with a 10-pound fear.
Absolutely.
I can work with a 7-minute fear all day. And then you come up with your plan. All right, how am I going to mitigate that? How do I make this less risky? Well, if this is a public speaking gig, right? What if I forget my lines? I'm going to practice on video like 20 times before I go do this. And I'm going to have my note cards in my breast pocket in case I really do forget. And then if I do forget and I'm talking about fear, I already know what I'm going to do there. I'm just going to take people through the panic that I'm going through. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a breath.
Breathe. And
I'm going to share with you, hey, I was scared. I was nervous about doing this. I just lost my mind. And let me walk you through how I'm going to bring myself back to what I really need to do for you today, which is talk about fear and how to use it. So I already have a default. If I lose my mind about everything, I can lean into that too and have a really real conversation.
Yeah.
Don't go longer than 10 minutes. Yeah, it becomes very unworkable.
So we obviously all have things we're afraid of: failure, loneliness, death. What are the most common types of fear you're dealing with now from the average person with Fear Sherpa?
I work a lot with people who are afraid of public speaking, getting out into the public with their powerful messages and stories. I find really, really compelling organizations doing amazing things, and the way that fear plays into that. With honest conversations. The conversation, relationship stuff seems to happen a lot. And then the who am I to lead this movement? The fear of being the imposter. Those are the most common groups of. Everybody has their own specific ways of saying that, but those seem to be the most common.
So you hinted this. We talked about this a little bit. But how do we keep our fears broken down into smaller chunks and workable? I think you already touched on this a little bit. Or a bunch.
So what is fear trying to tell me, right? And so, if you guys do this little thought experiment with me for a second, close your eyes. I want you to go to your favorite beach you've been to, and you can feel the warm breeze on the right side of your face, right? You got the sand between your toes, where the salt air smells. It's very, very pleasant, right? A warm zephyr type, bit of wind. And then all of a sudden, you start to feel this cold wind on the other side of the face. It's cold, it's a driving wind. You see the clouds changing. That's what fear is. Fear is letting us know that the situation isn't what we expected and that we need to be on alert. Things are different than I expected, right? So that's how fear can be useful. What is fear trying to tell me? What's different about the situation, right? Start there. Instead of like, I'm not afraid. Let me grind this out. Let me pretend like it doesn't exist. What a waste. That's right, Superman. So, and then leaning into it. With our language, we can upregulate fear, right? So I'm excited about being on Blair's podcast. Feels a lot like I'm nervous about being on Blair's podcast. And with a smile, we can go back to the land of excitement. Like, this is something we really want to have happen. And then that kind question, what's one little thing I can do to make the situation better? So you've got the inner monologue. So you can go the other way. Okay, so I'm nervous. Okay, well, I'm really scared. Now I'm terrified. And then I'm petrified. So scared I can't move, right? You can't outthink you're crazy, right? It doesn't work like that. And so sometimes you need the body to lead the mind. The ice is so good at that because it peels back the human brain and the mammalian brain. It goes right back to the brainstem. There's no worry or anxiety for reptiles. They're not able to do that. So the ice, skydiving, a lot of that stuff peels that stuff away when you're in the exhilaration of free fall.
Excellent.
And to practice, right? So to have a courage practice, to do stuff every single day that scares you, and I've shared this with you before, because of the size of our lives depend on our ability to be uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And sometimes, and this is part of the untrained fear response, can be deadly. Sometimes if we run from our fears, we'll die. Sometimes running away is the worst option.
Yeah, turning your back on a situation that you shouldn't.
Right? And the discernment to know when to harness that fear and lean into it. And to say, hey, it's raining. I'm scared of going on the roof. And I'm really afraid. I probably should honor that fear. There's no shame in walking away. I was studying Alex Honnold. He's the maybe the best rock climb soloist. That means climbing without protection. There's been many, many climbs that he's walked away from. Hey, it just didn't feel right today. And that's okay. And we don't always win against fear, right? So there's some days that I wake up and, man, I grab the bull by the horns. There's other days that I find myself on the couch crying like I don't have it today. And that's okay. Like, the ability to go back as an observer. How did I get to this point? I was doing too much. I wasn't doing the self-care. I wasn't floating. I wasn't doing the massage. I wasn't meditating. What was I doing to put back in? I was so stressed, and it doesn't matter if it's physical stress from workouts, relationship stress, business stress, all of that. There's only so much stress that we can handle. And then once we're so stressed, even little tiny things that could go either way, we now view it as a threat.
Totally makes sense. So you've talked a little bit about having a plan when fear strikes, how high-level athletes, performers, fighters have a plan to deal with fear in the heat of the moment. So I personally kind of experienced this and learned how to deal with it through jiu-jitsu. And,
nice.
Jiu-jitsu is, grappling with, submissions with the intention of choking somebody unconscious or, doing terrible things to their limbs. And the great thing about jiu-jitsu is there's the tap. You tap out when things have gone too bad, but there's also just taking a breath in a situation. Yes, somebody terrible is on my back about to do something terrible. Take a breath and, just assess the situation and don't panic. Panicking is in freaking out. It's the quickest way to end up unconscious on the mat with everybody pointing and laughing at you. I can very much appreciate that, okay, close my eyes, take a breath, protect my neck, and then figure out how to get out of this situation. So talk about the plan and what that looks like in real life too.
Yes. I've got a really good story. So I spent almost a month of my life learning how to jump out of airplanes. Gladly would have exchanged thousands of dollars to learn this skill. We got to do it during the day and also at night.
Oh, man.
The night was very terrifying, and that was a situation of finding a bigger fear than the skydiving. My bigger fear was to come back to my command with, like, how did you fail out of that? And that's not a conversation I wanted to have. Like, I had to go forward, right? So we finished up that course, and the next day, we earned our jump wings, and then we were going to do our conversion jumps to get our A license to be able to civilian jump in standard rigs. So the military rig, it has a ripcord in the front. The sport rig has a drogue chute in the bottom. So we go to do our practice touches, we do our conversion jumps. That's a story for another time. I had some fun in free fall. And then the next jump, we jumped with, I think it was 7 of us. And so the count was 1, 2, and jump on 3. So 7 of us fell from the sky together. We linked hands. We flew over top of each other. We flew these different formations. At 6,000 feet, check the altimeter. Okay, I tracked away. It feels like flying like Superman. You go from 120 to like 160 miles an hour. You really can feel that acceleration. It's really cool. And at 5,000 feet, check the airspace, right? And then after I clear, check the altimeter again, go to throw my chute. And I went to go to the front. I'm in a sport rig, right? What the hell? Where's my ripcord, right? And so this is a high-speed problem. I have about 10 seconds to solve this riddle, right? You're in a sport rig, dummy. That single breath saved my life. And again, not a euphemism. When my parachute opened at 2,700 feet, another 1,000 feet, another 10 seconds, my Cypress, my explosively operated reserve chute would have fired because it thought that I was unconscious. Still in free fall, getting close to the ground, right? So if I had thrown that 10 seconds later, I could have 2 canopies open. And God knows what would happen then, right? I mean,
that's not good.
Kind of luck of the draw at that point.
No bueno.
Right. And then also, it would have been, you're not allowed to skydive here anymore because you just did something insanely dangerous. What happened, right? So the breath was the default. So in the shooting courses, in practicing with IEDs, finding that single breath. I don't care what you're doing. If you're doing room clearance, with your rifle, jumping out of airplanes, crucial conversation with your wife, or business dealings, those things, there's always space for a single breath. And I drilled it so much that I didn't have to think about finding the breath. And that single breath that I took me a little ways away from being a reptile to being more human. Oh, I'm in a sport rig.
Dummy.
That was the most peaceful ride back to the earth under canopy. Thank God. Yeah.
Awesome. So, man, let's talk about the ice baths. I see you on Facebook sitting in a big tub of ice, and yet you're smiling. So, what in the world and why?
There's joy in ice, my friend. And if you can find joy in ice, you can find joy anywhere. And I mean that in terms of before we had psychopharmaceutical drugs, ice actually is known to naturally increase serotonin in the brain. It also increases testosterone. And there's something about practicing panic in a physical way that translates to the real world. So before we get in the ice bath, we do a whole bunch of breathing. I teach people how to superoxygenate the body. There's a lot of benefits to hyperbaric medicine in a chamber where we add a ton of oxygen to the body. There's certain organisms, certain diseases that abhor oxygen-rich environment. Cancer is one of those, different types of infections. And so we do that. We do that together for half an hour, 45 minutes. We're all breathing in sync with each other. We're building the safety of a tribe. And so before we get in the ice, we've got some warming techniques that we do, get the body to sweat a little bit, get nice and hot. And then we hop in the ice. And I'm a big fan of putting my head under. Not everybody does this. Head under, 15 seconds and come up. And just as I'm looking at your eyes right now, we can send kindness and compassion and calm through the eye gaze. And it's amazing when people can mirror the smile. And so that used to take me about 20 seconds to get through the panic, to relax again, to find that calm. Now it's 5-8 seconds. And it came in handy yesterday. I was almost in a car accident. And so when the adrenaline shows up, oh, hey, hello, old friend.
Right.
And I was able to expertly navigate my car. A couple inches to the left was an F-150. A couple inches to the right was this Crown Vic that slid through the intersection. Car was sliding a little bit, and I was calm. And I could see way more. So after the 30 seconds of the calm, this generally always happens. And then people realize, hey, I'm not going to die, is a smile happens. You're like, I did it. I did something really hard. I faced the fear and got to enjoy the exhilaration. So the smile is somewhat about the exhilaration.
Okay.
And then also mirroring back the smile I'm receiving from someone helping me through it.
So when you pop out, it's a group thing. Somebody's standing there.
Right there. A foot and a half away from you. Hey, look at me. Hey, you're okay. You know how to do this. You're going to be fine.
Right.
And then you are.
I have to try that sometime.
And then the whole body. So you know how like the weather feels like after a hurricane? How calm, how clean the air feels.
Yeah.
The body feels like that for hours afterwards.
Really?
It's really, really lovely.
I know when we go wakeboarding in early spring and late fall, I'm usually okay with, being hopping in when it's, high 50s, low 60s. Everybody else will not go in, or they need a full suit or whatever. So I'm definitely interested in trying it and testing myself. I'm not saying I won't have a problem with it, but I do okay with super chilly water and staying in it for, I'm ready to get up and out of the water as soon as the boat's ready. Don't get me wrong, but you have to sit there for some amount of time. I might squeal like you wouldn't expect to come out of a 6'5" guy, but
you can't help that. That's so ingrained. That gasp for air when you're in the cold, it takes a lot to overcome that instinct to gasp.
Well, I go to yell, and it's not a yell; it's a squeal, and it's like, oh, I'm 13 and a female.
You are not. You're a very scary-looking 13-year-old female, Blair.
All right, man. So let's talk about the book.
Yeah,
it's not out yet. So what's it going to be called? What can we expect out of it, and when will it be out?
Great question. So the name of the book is Fear Sherpa.
Nice.
The guide.
Big shock.
The guide to turning your fear into your superpower. It's my story. It's the long-form version of my time in the military as a bomb technician. The climb out from being buried alive in the avalanche, putting together this plan, getting myself together, accepting help from others. And then the second half of the book is the tools and techniques that I've found to be most beneficial for helping the reader become the master of their fears. We're in the final round of edits, so we're a couple weeks away from releasing this for pre-orders. Yeah.
And what vehicles are you going to use? Is it going to be on Amazon, or is it going to be more of a local deal?
I'm going to be taking pre-orders through my website. I'm not actually responsible for the strategy of how the book gets sold. That's
the publisher.
Right. So I don't know yet, but soon.
Okay. Cool. So, that ties into the next question. We'll come back to the podcast question. So where can people find out more about Fear Sherpa, and more importantly, how did it get started with you? If somebody's listening right now and like, man, I need that guy. Yeah. So how do they get in touch with you?
The easiest way is fearsherpa.com. That's FEARSHERPA.com. That's my site. Has a little bit of my story in there and ways to contact me. I'd love for you to just shoot me a quick note with maybe a small or medium-sized fear, building a product to help people with that, especially in the sales and small business space. So that would help me out a lot. And then that would give us an opportunity to start a conversation and see where it goes from there. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. Just look up Fear Sherpa. I'm on YouTube. I have a couple YouTube videos there too. On YouTube, it's Fear Sherpa with no space. FEARSHERPA.
Cool. And that's, obviously you just said this, but that's where your book will be available for pre-order as well.
Yes.
Awesome. So your other kind of media adventure is your podcast.
It is.
So let's talk about that, what it's called, where can people find it, and how that's going.
Sure. So it's called the Altitude Academy. And we're taking our time with it. And the theme of the show is we're biohacking and growing together. Very much the tribe idea. And we start the show with everybody goes around the room. So it's Matt Bain, who owns a CrossFit-style gym called S3 Performance Coaching. Dave Robinson, he's leading a Blue Zone movement. Blue Zone is an area on the map where people live exorbitantly longer than the average through lifestyle, movement, nutrition, and close relationships. So he's created one of those. And we each take a turn going around, hey, what are your 3 wins from the last time we chatted? And we take a time to look over the shoulder, tap ourselves on the back, and just give some gratitude for the altitude that we've gained. And this was inspired from keeping a gratitude journal for a year. A year and a half actually, I wrote down 3 things I was thankful for, like the way the coffee tastes today, or the way the sun feels on my skin, and a very beneficial relationship maybe I haven't thought of in a long time. Kind of stolen from the 5-minute journal. And then I turn it into the altitude log, where I would find that if I studied Tim Ferriss or Tony Robbins or Gary Vee or some of these transformational players, God, I want to be there so bad. And man, there's such a long way to the top of that summit. Man, and I would get depressed. And it took saying thank you for the 3 little areas that I've gained altitude in And so making it okay for people to just acknowledge, hey, you're making progress. Look over your shoulder from time to time. Enjoy the view. And then, it goes wherever it goes, either in the world of training or biohacking or spirituality or Wim Hof or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that, again, that kind of applies to the same kind of thought behind breaking down the fear into smaller pieces. And, it's unimaginable as a big piece, but when you start chunking away at it, so it also works on, the success level.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, man. So any other shout outs or stuff you want to mention? You have speaking engagements or events, anything coming up?
The book is a big thing, so there's going to be a lot on that. I'm going to start releasing chapters of that on my LinkedIn channel, so you can read portions of it. I want to hear from you. Building events for the fall involving skydiving and hang gliding and a few of those other things to get to know fear better in an adventure type setting. So look for those.
Nice.
We'll be visiting CrossFit gyms. So if you're a CrossFit gym owner or involved with CrossFit, we have a course called Make Fran Fear You.
Oh, I've heard about this.
Yeah. So we repurpose people's relationship to scary exercises. And so we have a very easy way. So if Fran's not your thing or CrossFit's not your thing, we have ways to substitute ice baths, skydiving. You guys can kind of pick the poison. And that course is then called Make Fear You. But how do you show up differently? How do you seek out things that feel uncomfortable? Yeah.
Matt Bain keeps on trying to get me to do the Make Fran Fear You, and I'm hearing about puking, and
it's good for you. Builds character. So CrossFit Pushing Weight in September most likely will be the next time we run that course. So looking forward to that. Thanks, Ashley, for that opportunity.
Awesome, man. Any final thoughts?
Fear can be a friend. Fear can keep us warm, but also left unchecked, it'll burn the house down. Fear requires us to be its master, and I hope that you do that because life on the other side of this is pretty amazing. Remember, do something every day that scares you and do it anyway, because the size of our lives depend on that very thing.
Awesome, Brian. Man. Thank you so much for coming on, man, and I've really enjoyed hearing the full story. Again, I've only heard bits and pieces, and so I really appreciate you coming on, man. So
happy to be here, Blair. Thank you so much for having me. Guest number 2.
That's number 2, baby.
Yeah, man.
So that's it, folks. Thanks for listening, and thanks for coming on the show, man. And everybody have a positive and productive day. Peace.
Cheers.